Hey everybody, welcome back to Feedback Loop. I'm Joey.
And I'm Jeremy.
And this week we're listening to an album with a really long name. It's Alone in the Bright Lights of a Shattered Life by the Library Tapes. Or just Library Tapes, not the Library Tapes. They're not like a punk band from the early 2000s.
Because they all had the in front of them.
Yeah, it was like I can't think of any.
The Ramones.
Yeah, there we go. The Ramones.
Clash.
They're from the early 2000s.
Early 2000s, the Ramones, yeah. Woo!
Pretty sure half of them were dead by that time.
Yeah, well, we're already off to a rip-roaring start. Why did we do this album, Joey? Why did you force this upon me?
So we've been trying to listen to albums that we aren't really super familiar with, and just to do that, I looked through my old notebook of songs to listen to and albums to listen to, and this band was on there, but they had a check mark by their name, like I had listened to them, but I remembered nothing about the album, so I figured, whatever, we'll give it another listen.
And when you listened to it this week, did it bring back any memories? Like, oh yeah, this is that album, kind of a thing.
Not even almost. I expected it to, but I was just like, yep,
completely foreign.
Yeah,
nice.
Which, I mean, that happens. Sometimes I get in the groove when I'm like working, and that's whenever I listen to music, which I probably shouldn't, but because I don't really retain too much. It's like whenever my mom's talking to me while I'm playing video games or something.
Yeah.
Just like,
does that happen often?
It used to happen, and she would get so pissed. She'd be like, I told you to clean your room. We have company coming over. And I'm like, oh, I was playing Spider-Man, Mom.
Hell yeah. Good old Spider-Man for the PlayStation and or PC.
It was the PlayStation. It was Spider-Man 2.
Oh.
Yeah.
That was probably PS2 era. That's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
We listened to this album for the past week, and now we're gonna tell you what we think of it, I guess.
Yeah. I guess we shouldn't.
That's what we tend to do.
We shouldn't just keep droning on like a broken piano or something.
Yeah, we don't need to. We don't want to make this episode so long as to have a part 2 of it either. So, without further ado, I'm not gonna rhyme. I was gonna
come on, man.
Track number 1, Broken Piano Part 2.
There we go.
Which is always a fun way to start an album, with a part 2.
Yeah.
Having part 1 later in the album.
Yeah, that's it's a little wonky, but I'm here for it. So this one, I guess since neither of us really know anything about it, I'll start.
Yeah, take it away.
But yeah, it starts off with essentially what sounds like an old clanky piano, fits right in with the name, Broken Piano. The kind I feel like you'd find in an abandoned rec room. Like whenever this guy's playing it, I instantly get flashed back to whenever I was pretty young. I went to a Catholic school, as I have mentioned, and there was like seriously maybe like 100-something kids in this whole school. Mm-hmm. And so it was empty a lot of the times. And since there was a church attached to it, there was all sorts of organs and pianos. And I just get like, those liminal spaces you see online where it's like, oh, it's a weird 90s carpet with the white walls and it feels like you're in a separate universe. It was very much that, and that's kind of where I get transported to whenever I hear the sound of this piano. It's like a little bit out of tune, but there's some slow chords and a light melody, like a sad dance, and just creates that ambience, instantly throws me back there in my head.
That's interesting, because to me the sound of the piano, instead of, I guess I didn't really have an anchor point like you seem to have had for that kind of sounding piano, but for me it had this kind of like almost obituary feel to it, like you're like at a funeral or something where someone has died, and it feels like it was kind of reflective in some way, like people are just kind of gathered around and reflecting on life of someone that has just died, but it's just kind of like, I don't know, it's just slightly out of tune and wonky, like you kind of said, and it just, I don't know, it gives an almost like unsettling vibe to it, especially towards the end of the track. It kind of has this sense of foreboding that I was getting. It felt very uneasy to me.
Well, that uneasiness it seems to be a theme here. There's a slight unease to a lot of what's going on, and in that vein, I'm gonna go ahead and right off the bat say that, like, there's been previous like ambient albums, like Loath's album that we did, the
One Tricks Point Never.
Yeah, One Tricks Point Never. Like those, it seems like in my head, I was instantly taken to like a storyline, and this one didn't really do that.
Yeah, I agree.
Like
I for better or worse, I think that that is just an effect that I was kind of like I don't sit down and try to force a narrative necessarily, but yeah, like you said, there tends to be when listening to the ambient albums that we've listened to before, there tends to be some sort of narrative that comes to mind or some location that we're transported to. And a lot of that didn't come easily this week at least. I did start to kind of go somewhere with it towards the latter half of the album, but there wasn't like a fully coherent story in my mind.
yeah, it's I had a little bit of one at the beginning rather than the end, and this one, which I guess because of how lonely I felt a lot in the school that I was at when I was a kid, it took me to like a post-apocalyptic world, but like an empty one, not like a Mad Max Fallout thing where people are just fucking getting murdered all over the place,
Yeah,
but like the kind where you'd walk outside and it's just silent, and there's like the ones where people get sucked up into alien spaceships, or like they get turned
yeah,
into dust, so you're just like cars are out in the middle of the street, half doors are half opened and shit like that.
yeah, like
And
that Will Smith movie. I don't remember what it was called. It was
I
a
don't
big
remember.
movie, and I
I
feel like I should know what it was called.
No, it
But
wasn't iRobot. It was I Am Legend. Was that one?
yeah, that
The
sounds
one
right.
with the dog?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
we'll go
I
with that.
yeah. But yeah, that's kind of where I went for this one, where it was like I was stepping outside of the church that I was picturing in my head, and instead of seeing the normal congregation of your usual Sunday folks, it was just blank emptiness as far as the eye could see.
That's interesting. I think I did hit a similar uh, story beat, I suppose, in the next track or the next track or two, when I was kind of spitballing what I was trying to feel, but I didn't quite get there. But I do like the idea of the first track being you're in maybe not in a safe place, but you're somewhere near your heart, at least your past heart, where you've kind of you have experiences and you're kind of stepping out of that, so you're no longer in a safe place somewhere near your heart.
Yeah, it's weird to have somewhere so close to me that I can attribute music to. Like this guy, I will give him credit for that. Track one, and especially track number two, titled "In a Safe Place, Somewhere Near Your Heart."
Good segues. We're stepping up our game now.
Hell yeah,
2022, you better look out. We're coming for
yeah,
you.
we're on the horizon.
Hell yeah. This one, track two, has some more like ambient noise of like keys rattling and what to me sounded like unlocking of doors. The piano kind of comes in and it's a cleaner piano. It's a more like polished sound. So it felt a little bit more optimistic, but it still had this kind of dark foreboding for me. And then you get this acoustic guitar that comes in that accompanies and it gives kind of warmth to the cold piano that is kind of setting the vibe thus far on the album. It still has like a twinge of like funeral vibes for me. And then you get hit with this noisy like tremolo picking reverb the fuck out guitar sound that comes in and it's super like overwhelming, but not like in a repulsive way where I had to like take off the headphones or anything. It's just very noisy. And this is where I hit something similar to what you mentioned. To me, that experience kind of felt like we've been trapped in the long forgotten halls of some sort of asylum for years. And this is that big wall of sound is the light of the sun that we've not seen in so long, kind of creeping in. We've opened a door to the outside, perhaps, and we're just hit with this blinding light that we don't really know how to process. And then towards the end of the song, there's like some metallic ambient creaking noises that come in as the guitar fades, and eventually the piano fades too. That just kind of like leaves us with some sort of like whirling noise, like we've passed out or something from being overexposed to overstimulated, I guess, by the sunlight.
I like that. Like it's interesting that you, I guess, equated that giant wall of sound to the sunlight, because I kind of did that too, but it was kind of, it didn't make sense to me in my brain why I did it,
Right.
but it was just the sound. I mean, it's what it felt like.
It was a
So
sensation. Yeah.
yeah, like for me, it was like I walked outside of the church and was instantly hit. Like everything turned hot and orange.
Yeah.
And I was like wandering outside in this barren, desolate place. And it was almost like a dust storm or a sandstorm whenever the wall of guitars came in, where it was like I couldn't even fully open my eyes or register the things around me. And everything was just like hot. The sun was burning. So, like, I don't know.
I
I
like that.
maybe that's like it's just so weird to me because with other albums, it seemed like I guess we had similar journeys on some of them, but and I mean on Replica, I think we kind of had almost the same
Yeah.
journey, which was really weird. But it made like without words, it does make it seem kind of crazy that we can both like come up with
Themes and
similar,
such.
yeah. Which I mean, I guess that's the sound of music. Like that's that you're kind of going for a vibe. So
Right.
general vibes are kind of
Yeah,
I don't.
I think General Vibes is a good alternate title for this album. Just the way that we both have kind of ambiguous, not super like finite imagery that comes to mind. We just get feelings from the instruments that are cold, that are warm, that are haunting, that are comforting, whatever. Which is it's fun. But yeah, this album stands out definitely because it doesn't necessarily pull it does nothing really comes into focus, I guess. It's like you're looking at a blurry image of things and you get the general idea of what's happening, but nothing's really like focused.
Yeah, and I don't know, like it's as close as you can get to any sort of feeling or real storyline. It'll just like it'll leave, and then you're just like, man, that storyline has really left us. Like, and
Yeah, and if you're stepping outside from your church, you're crunching on some leaves and then you're transported to this bright sandscape. It feels like the leaves have left us.
yeah.
Just like in track number 3, the leaves have left us.
See, at first I wanted to do like actual leaves, but then I was like, I
Then you
feel like,
split it up. Yeah.
yeah, I was like, I feel like the title of this, "The Leaves Have Left Us," like somebody's leaving and they have left us. I feel like
I
they're
gotcha.
trying
So
to
you're
do,
saying leaves as in a group of people
yeah.
are called the leaves
But I
because
mean,
the leavers have left.
yeah, I
But
don't know.
also the track following also kind of implies that there's some leaves, and I think
Yeah,
there's some merit to that, which is why I think it's interesting that you went into this kind of sandscape because I think I tended to go towards more like a cold snowy forest
hmm
throughout my journey. But
which
yeah, track number 3. Take it.
that's usually where
Talk.
I go, like
Yeah,
the wintry forests. So
the
I don't,
black metal.
yeah, which that's kind of something that I thought about throughout this. Like this one, I'll just get in. I'm not gonna keep talking about my meta of where my brain goes during music, but this one it brings in like a slightly gentler guitar part again
Hmm.
that's backed up by another guitar part coming in to complement the melody, which is something that happens a lot on this album. Is like they kind of layer each loop. There's like a general melody that gets layered on top of itself, kind of like you hear in like I don't know, like in house music. I think I had compared some ambient to house music where
Yeah.
they're constantly layering stuff on top of loops of a melody, and it just eventually gets this kind of fuller sound. But this one, it has the guitar coming in to complement the original guitar melody, all while this steady rumbling is heard in the background, and then the guitar melody kind of changes up about halfway through to something that sounds a little bit more progressive. Like
Hmm.
I'd say most of the melodies that have been played so far are I don't know, expected. It's I mean, they're usually like kind of minor, sadder sounding things,
Right.
but
They're
this one
simple.
yeah, like they're simple. And this one kind of steps a little bit out of that and I like that. And it kind of changes like you were talking about the funeral feeling, that general slow feeling from
Yeah.
before this, and it brings it back up a little bit. It piques my interest. So the guitar one is cool. The guitar work is cool on this song, and it keeps building with more guitars. And I don't know. I just like the layering. I guess is the long wind or the short winded version of what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I definitely called that out in a very similar way as you. To me, I kind of picked up more a location, I suppose. I kind of went back towards, whereas in the last track I didn't really have much of a location other than like stepping out into the sunlight, but that doesn't seem to mesh with what I was getting from this song specifically. And those, you called it a rumbling sound in the background. It kind of like, it was reminiscent to me of like a train rattling down some old rickety like tracks, like underground in some tunnel or something. And this track kind of like at the beginning, it has that nice warm acoustic, but it was like maybe we've gone back. Maybe we're in another dark place now. The time for sunlight that we had is no longer here. And that kind of maybe was representative of some like false hope that we thought we had have found a way out, but we actually just got lost somewhere else in these deep dark sub levels of wherever we are. But yeah, I really enjoyed the layering of the guitars, and it kind of made me wonder if this is the first time that I mention it, and I think I drop it until the end. But I was wondering if maybe the layered guitars is implying that there's another character on this journey, that we've encountered somebody else as we're kind of exploring this place. But it's still like that guitar sound fades out and it leaves at the end of the song, and it feels like there may have been a connection there, but we kind of went our separate ways, and now we're still just kind of like walking in darkness with no real aim.
I like that you went to darkness and the separate voices, because I think that too, like the layering of the guitars or the pianos, that does happen
Yep.
later. I don't think it has happened in the previous two songs, but there's layering of pianos later where it's like the same instruments layered on top of each other. And I don't know if this is reading too far into it or hindsight being 2020, but me taking the guitar being layered over itself instead of having another person, I thought of it as the voices in my head are the separate points of view, I guess, are the separate layers of the instrument.
Yeah.
And this one, it felt like I had slid into a small cave, I guess, trying to get out of whatever storm or bright sunlight, whatever. And I'm trying to figure out my next moves. It like in kind of a safe haven away from the danger of outside. And as the guitar builds up, I can start to feel the confusion of my situation building in my brain, kind of like, I don't, like whenever the voices in your head get way too loud, or
Yeah,
just,
kind of like a moment of panic or something.
yeah, like that super panic attack moment where it's like everything is way louder than it should be, and it's all beaming directly into your brain, and you're
Yeah.
just like, I gotta stop, I gotta stop, and it like, it kind of gets reined back as the guitar settles down. So it just built up this moment of like panic and anxiety, but then brought it back down, which is
Yeah.
just at the end.
Yeah, that's a good descriptor, I think, because I think I had similar feelings throughout a few parts on this album of just those kind of like panic attack moments where you're feeling just overwhelmed. Like I said in the last track, it when the quote unquote sunlight hit, it was just so overwhelming and encompassing that like it clouded the entirety of the thoughts that you could have during that moment. So I don't think it's out of line to kind of feel in that direction where now you're feeling lost, which I mean, I guess is also, I guess it's not specifically what you said, but that's a good connection, I think, between us, is that like mine felt directionless, yours was kind of trying to figure out what the direction is, what the next step is, kind of a thing.
Yeah, there was a lot of like internal directionlessness
Right.
and hopelessness, and I don't know. And all this sun, things still feel cold. Like the leaves that have left in this song are just, now they're cold leaves for this violent ground that is just attacking us, and we don't know where to go.
Well, I think we should go on to track number 4, Cold Leaves for the Violent Ground.
Man, this guy does not make it easy.
He
Didn't you
doesn't.
think about our
He doesn't.
segues when you were writing your song titles?
What year did this album come out? I'm pretty sure our podcast didn't exist
Yeah, it
at
was
the time.
2005.
Yeah, so there we go. He's so inconsiderate of future people trying
Yeah,
to
what the hell,
segue his
man?
thing. But yeah,
One
track
word
number
song
4.
titles. That's all I ask for.
Just one word. If we make an album, is it all just one word song titles?
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna hold you to that.
Oh god.
But yeah, track number 4. This one has some more like really noisy ambience that kind of flows in, providing a backdrop for the piano's return. And this is where I explicitly called out: are the piano and guitar separate characters? Are they just separate emotions of the same character? Which is something that you kind of hit on in the last track. In this one, the piano felt a bit more hopeful, but it still kept a kind of cold sensation. Whereas the guitars are generally warm sounding to me. The piano always feels kind of cold, like I'm walking through like a snowy forest or field, but it's still kind of like dark. It's kind of finding a balance, I guess.
Yeah, that is a really good point because the piano on this one, it is so lonely and like direct, and it hits you so clearly. It's like I think that's why I went back to my early life, is
Yeah,
because there's a lot of those pianos that you just find places that nobody has maintained, and you just the first note you hit, you can hear the hammer pounding in the back of it. It's just so like clanky, and
yeah,
it sounds so inhuman. Whereas the guitar, I feel like the acoustic guitar, at least that they play on this, is like a nylon string because it just sounds so warm and rich and full that it it's like the perfect opposite
yeah. It's
of
a
the
good
piano,
contrast.
which I like the sound of it. Um, like it's just, I guess maybe that's why it sounds so I don't know, apocalyptic,
Yeah,
because I feel like the guitar is me and the piano is just the outside world.
yeah,
But which maybe that's why, like, they are, like you said, different emotions, and maybe that's why I didn't necessarily get taken on like a full journey, is because it immediately forced me to kind of just reflect on
yeah,
what I would be thinking, because this song specifically is kind of where I stopped having any sort of clear story. Before it, I was kind of in this post-apocalyptic world, but this one, it kind of just brought me inward. And with the piano that's playing, the melody on this one doesn't really change up too much until the very end, whenever that white noise ambience in the background starts to fade away. It kind of made me think of the storm clearing, but
yeah,
other than that, I was just kind of completely internal, and I think still reeling from the anxiety that I felt in the previous song.
yeah. I think there's definitely a point to be made about this album kind of having a more emotional internal journey than a more cinematic or image based journey that we've had in the past, which is it's cool. It's fun that it does that, because it's kind of like, it's wild to think about how other ambient albums have differed so significantly from this in that way, and that like it's still just music, it's still just instruments being played to evoke certain feelings and emotions, but in such a kind of specific way that is devoid of any imagery in both of our minds is kind of cool.
Yeah, I I want to listen to more from the library tapes. I just haven't. I mean, I've heard single other songs just
Right.
because Spotify has like the top 5 songs by this artist or whatever. That whenever I just click on their name, it starts playing. But I do need to do a deep dive. I heard that they have an album from 2016 called Escapism that, in my reading online, heard it was really good. So I'll have to try that one out.
Like,
'Cause-
escapism is in there, you're stuck in some sort of prison or asylum, and there's you're sitting there scratching on the window on each door of each cell, trying to escape, kind of escapism.
Exactly, just like that. And speaking of that, track number 5, Jeremy, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you know, is titled "The Scratches on the Window and the Doors of Each Cell."
I would know. I would 100% know.
I know nothing more than that. That's all I know. That's one of the
That's all
seven
I
things
know
I know this
anymore.
week.
Exactly. But yeah, on this one, the dark somber sadness kind of returns heavy with the low pounding piano, and it's once again joined by the guitar. And this one, it felt like there's more layers of melody in this track than in other ones, and it even has like a clean electric guitar that comes in on this one, and then some ambient noise starts to kind of build slowly. And to me, that was like, okay, this feels like a point of convergence this is several paths of characters, of beings kind of converging, and this is where I kind of went in a different direction narratively. It kind of made me wonder if these are like, if it was like, pardon me, this is going to get a bit poetic and esoteric,
Oh
but
shit.
it was like, are lost souls finding their way to the afterlife? Is that what the story is? Where it's just a bunch of just not necessarily connected souls passing each other in some sort of purgatory and finding their way to the afterlife. And then you kind of the ambience grows loud and warped and metallic and shoegazy, and the wailing sounds that just come from it just evoked imagery of like a tortured soul being punished for a life of sins, where it seems like we're just getting deeper and deeper as we progress towards our destination of the afterlife, and maybe it's not a happy afterlife that we're going to stumble into.
So, it not being a happy afterlife, that's something that I didn't get the afterlife part, but the not happy part at the reaching some sort of threshold and the other side not being happy,
Mhm.
I totally got. So that's super cool because it does it like you said, it keeps building up and that static in the back. Whereas other ambient albums we've listened to, it seems like some of the ambience is pleasant and it's
Right.
like wind or nature sounds or something. This is a lot of like static and big building noises in the
Yeah.
background.
It's almost like industrial.
Yeah, and it that kind of for me put me in a place where maybe I wasn't going to the afterlife. I was kind of the opposite, but waking up where it was like I was in a dream and it wasn't a good dream. But then I don't know if you've ever screamed yourself awake, but like whenever you're snapping out of sleeping and you're kind of just like yelling in your
Yeah.
dream, but which I mean in real life you're kind of like, but
Yeah.
then eventually you fully wake up and you're just like ah, and you're
Yeah.
like oh, I'm awake
You
now.
you
But
you found the precipice of the dream and the real world, and the change between is such a fine line that
yeah,
you don't have time to react until when you cross it, then you're just awake.
and you're just like oh god, that was deeply unpleasant,
Yeah.
and that's kind of where it took me. And I'm gonna go ahead and preface this because I liken it to a Black Mirror episode. Have you ever watched Black Mirror, or do you care to
I've
watch it?
seen an episode, but you can spoil it. I guess spoiler alert
Yeah,
for Black Mirror if someone listening wants to enjoy Black Mirror.
definite spoiler alert. I'd go ahead and skip the next like minute or so of this podcast if you want to watch it because I really like this episode. But there was an episode of it was a Black Mirror episode where this guy he's like beta testing an implantable game.
I
It's
think I
like
saw that episode.
really? Okay. Well, it's like this game that is like implanted into his brain that he's playing, and it's like he goes through this whole episode doing all this shit in the game, and like it's I think it was like a horror game or like a
Yeah.
mystery game or something, and just playing this whole game. Just it seems like it's happening for like 40 minutes, whatever the length of the episode is. But then the end, he just I guess his like mom gets attacked by whatever this monster is in the game, and he's just like screaming, "Mom, mom, mom!" But then it flashes to the real world and it's been like half a second and
Yeah.
he was supposed to turn his phone off because there was like interference with whatever waves were going on and he got a text from his mom,
Yeah.
so it says it's flashing mom on his phone and he's just like screaming and then his brain just fries. And that's kind of like where my mind went when I was listening to this, like something in the real world affecting your dream mental state so much to the point where it's like influencing how your mind is working and then you
Yeah.
just kind of snap out of it in this moment of terror, I guess.
Yeah. That I think that is the only episode of Black Mirror I've seen.
Well, I'm
But that
glad.
it's a cool comparison to make, and I think that definitely happens on a obviously much lesser scale in real life. Like if someone is trying to wake you up while you're sleeping, oftentimes that kind of produces imagery of that person in your dream, or auditory hallucinations while you're in that dream of the person saying a thing. And it's a big movie trope as well, I guess,
Yeah.
of someone's alarm going off while they're in a dream, and it represents itself as something else in the dream or whatever. But yeah, that's cool. I like that. I like that interpretation, and I'm really excited to see where because it feels like this is a divergent point for us
Yeah.
within this album, and even from this track to the next track for me, I kind of backtrack and change the direction of things, and I get a little more poetic as the album ends in the next few tracks, and just kind of like I let myself give in to everything, so that's fun.
Well, the backtracking is fine because we're just gonna end up repeating ourselves like a broken piano again.
Because broken pianos loop themselves like a broken record. Speaking of broken records and broken pianos, track number 6 is part 1 of Broken Piano.
Which, what the heck, man? That's track 6.
It is.
Part 1. You're
It
a
is.
liar.
Part
Library
and
tapes.
track 1 was part 2, and I I'm sure it was intentional, right?
Yeah.
It has to symbolize, it has to mean something, some sort of loop or connection in my mind. I didn't make the connection, but I feel like there was intention there.
Yeah.
It wasn't just that like, well, this one happens to sound better in this place, which I mean it could be, but in my tinfoil mind, there has to be a reason for it. But yeah, so this is the return of the broken detuned piano, and my mind took this as like the piano. This is the piano being played by some sort of like court jester in hell. This is some like purgatory holding room where we're just sitting here waiting to be judged and sentenced by Satan himself, just kind of like waiting, and this jester is playing music to quote unquote entertain us while we're waiting. And then we kind of hear some floorboards creaking towards the end of the song. And this was like, okay, that this throws everything off. Maybe we're in some sort of attic, and I've lost all sort of like context for narrative at that point. And then I'm like, okay, I've got to bring it back in. So perhaps we never left our asylum, and we've only journeyed from one wing or one portion of the asylum to the next, and we're journeying downward and downward and downward, sublevel by sublevel, into the dark depths that are below in this kind of abandoned asylum, only to arrive in the attic of hell. So we're kind of going down, and then like, okay, well, wait, that doesn't really make sense, and that's also kind of the stupid thing to say, but so perhaps it's not hell. Perhaps the perspective has shifted to that of a god, but it's not like a benevolent god. There's no being of hope. It's God as this final judge, jury, and executioner of every soul. And our fate is hanging at the whims of some like cosmic being kind of happening. And that's maybe where the attic implication is that there's someone above us watching and guiding and controlling us.
So, like the Old Testament God
Yeah,
who will
the
just
the
fucking,
angry god.
yeah, the one who will just fuck you up
It
because,
was it was almost like not even Christian God. It was just like ambiguous, omnipotent being, like a Cthulhu kind of thing. Just some like old god figure to me.
see, I don't, I mean, I like your interpretation, and I don't feel like an attic necessarily has to even be outside, because outside of hell, I guess. I mean, I'm having half thoughts here, but
I really
uh,
shook you up.
it's like, oh my god, oh your god, oh some god
Oh
attacking me.
the god.
But this kind of overarching, I don't know, the creaky footsteps. It sounds like something's following you, or something's trying to look for you, is kind of what I got. So I think our monsters might be similar. It's just that yours is a god and mine is a general feeling of terror, because where you went to the afterlife, I kind of did go divergent path, and this is like the real life where it's like I woke up from a nightmare in the
Mm.
previous song, but I woke up to another nightmare. And this, while the piano was playing, it sounds like something slowly lurching and walking while the piano's playing, and then you hear that creaking floorboard. I feel like I'm trying to hide from something, and like there's quiet pained moans that I felt like I could hear behind the piano. I don't know if they're actually there, but it sounded like I could hear them. And it was just, this thing was just like trying to find me, and the piano felt like it was getting just like punched, like played so hard as the song went on, and I was just like whimpering in a corner. And instead of however safe I might have been in this dream, I am definitely not safe now. And I think that might be where our paths converge, is the feeling of just like not being safe.
I like that a lot. I am curious when you say you've woken up from a nightmare into another nightmare, are you talking like reality is the nightmare, or are you having some like Inception thing where you're just nested in several nightmares and you're not really sure what reality is?
I think it's that reality is the nightmare, but I honestly can't be sure. It's just
You can
like,
never be sure. Maybe we're in the Matrix, man.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, you can't be sure of anything. So do
I
your
like it.
thing, man.
Try to unplug yourself from the Matrix, and hopefully you won't find yourself alone in the bright lights of a shattered life that was left before you in reality.
Man, if you were in the Matrix, you would definitely be alone in the bright lights of a shattered life whenever you unplugged. Because, dude, the fucking world in the Matrix was so not good.
It's
I
so
would,
not good.
but
But if that does happen to you, we've got a song. Boy, have I got a song for you. Track number 7, "Alone in the Bright Lights of a Shattered Life," which is also
oh,
the title track.
they said the thing.
They
This
said the
is
thing.
this is the thing.
They did it.
The piano on this one, where the broken piano was very boisterous and loud and broken. This one, it starts off like really lonely and reverby. It sounds really sad and reflective, and the guitar eventually comes back in to accompany the piano, but that doesn't really change the sadness in the sound. It slowly builds up with each instrument taking over new melody work, like doing that layering thing that they've been
Hmm.
doing, and it comes back, which I do like this effect that they have, where it's like as each layer is added and each new instrument comes in, they kind of divert from the melody that the other one is playing, just to do this little, like, I don't know, lead part over it, but then it
Yeah.
comes back together to give the melody a fuller sound each time. So it's like as the guitar comes in, it kind of does a little bit of something breaking away from the melody, but then comes back, and then as another piano comes in, it kind of plays its own thing and then comes back. So each time you're getting a little bit of a taste of something new, but then the melody is being reinforced even more each time something else comes in.
Yeah, I like that. And I kind of manifested that in this kind of final track. My thoughts kind of come complete, I think, whereas they've been kind of scattered and have been like thrown for loops and not really sure how to tie everything together. But yeah, like you said, it has a bunch of different, like, it has a clean piano, it has the broken gestures piano, as I called it, and to me that was like this track has all of the elements of the previous tracks, where they could be characters, they could be emotions, however you want to call it. But it seemed to me that this is symbolizing the reconciliation of what is old and what is new, and this kind of contrast between the hope of possibility and then the finality of death, just kind of contrasting, kind of a yin yang kind of situation. Everything's coming together, and the guitars come in, and they're kind of warm and guiding. So my mind kind of went in this direction where maybe the distinct instruments are different spirits that are guiding us on our journey, each of them having their own desired destination for us, or a desired outcome for us. And it seems at times the intentions were treacherous, but this final track we kind of find the peace and acceptance that suits all of them. All of their roads point to here, whether that's, destiny or fate. It feels like we've removed all purpose of choice, because every path, every suggestion leads to the same place. And to me that was like, there's no true freedom, there's no meaningful journey, only a fixed starting point and a fixed ending point. And to me, this realization is like, it's destructive to our sanity, because the song explodes into some like burning bright noise. And to me, that was like us lashing out with every fiber of our being against quote unquote fate. And yet we're still being dragged forward to our final destination, not the movie, but the concept of final destination. And it just like, we're hopeless, and then the song kind of like scatters and dissipates, and then we're nothing at all. So it's just kind of this last fight against fate, realizing that nothing we have done has mattered as a society, and then we explode, and our soul disperses and dissipates into the void until there's no trace of us ever having existed. There's no memories of us because time cares for no one.
Hell yeah, dude. What a fucking ending.
Yeah, it's a big downer finale, but that's where it went, and
I'm
it kind of tied to, at least it, maybe it was just me trying too hard to connect the imagery of like having hell and having heaven and having lost souls and all these things kind of culminate, but that's kind of where it went for me.
I like that. Like the whole concept of having free will in a world where there's an omnipotent being that's supposedly watching every move or has created you or whatever.
Yeah.
Like it is something that has never sat right with me. And
Mhm.
shout out to Rush, the band. Go listen to the song Free Will, and it's
Is this our first Rush shout out? I find that hard to believe.
I feel like there's probably been one somewhere, but Rush is awesome. Go listen to Free Will. Go listen to the whole album of just listen to all their albums actually, you know.
Just listen to Rush, man.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Listen. Also, another one that's kind of, I feel like, in a thematic same vein as Free Will. Listen to Roll the Bones. That's a good song. It's an underrated album because it came out in like the 90s and nobody listened to 90s Rush, but
Yeah.
you should. But back to the topic at hand and your interpretation of the album, I really like kind of the lashing out where it's like, what has this all been for? I haven't been. What am I, just a pawn in the scheme? And then it ends. It's just done, and you're
Yeah.
just nothing. Like there's a definite finality to this song. Is the longest song on the album at 9.5 minutes long. The last like 3 minutes is essentially just the song becoming silent,
Yeah.
and it's a very final feeling to this album whereas you took it as the death of all of these souls, or the final death of all of these souls, the erasure of all of them and their consciousness that they had. I kind of went in a, I won't say an opposite way, but because there is still the nothingness, but this was me, or whoever the protagonist in my mind is, the static building back up reminded me of the screaming that I felt in track 5, but less like hopeless screaming and more like a cry out into the distance just to kind of get all of the anxiety out.
Yeah.
But in doing so, whatever was chasing me, it found me.
Yeah. Maybe not the best move.
But it was just like all of the emotions inside of me were building up to a point where, much like how I was screaming to wake myself up from the dream, I was screaming here to attempt to wake myself up from life,
Reality. Yeah.
and it ended the only way that life ends.
Being stabbed by some monster that's been hunting you.
Yep.
Yeah, that's crazy. I'm glad we had different finales for this album, and pretty distinct experiences overall. I think. I mean, obviously there's some similar themes and stuff in there, but yeah, this is good shit. This is, I don't particularly love this album as an album. I don't know if I'd go back and listen to it again. But it was a good experience. It was fun doing this. I love listening to ambient albums and stuff, regardless of whether I think they're quote unquote quality music or something that I'd want to revisit. But yeah, this is fun. And also to not end on such a down note, I guess. I think ultimately the album's quote unquote storyline is probably less dramatic than what I came up with, and I think the less dramatic interpretation of what I've said is just like, I don't know, we spend all of our lives worrying about what happens after we die, and we kind of trap ourselves in thought about that instead of just accepting that we will one day die and one day we will be forgotten, and that we should focus our energy instead of on the future, focus on what we have here and now, because time is the only meaningful resource and it's not something that we have any control over.
Definitely. Like it's like that quote that somebody out there said once, where if you obsess about something bad happening before it happens, you're only putting yourself through it twice. And I
Yeah,
feel like a lot of people need to like put that in context with death or with whatever they're worrying about in the afterlife. Which, I mean, is easier said than done. Like,
for
death
sure,
is
for sure.
essentially the most final thing that will ever. It's the biggest thing that's ever going to happen to you in your whole life because it's going to end your life. But like, I don't know, if you're going to spend your whole time obsessing about what happens after you die, what are you living for? I guess. But I don't know.
Yeah,
That's easy to say as a non-religious person. I don't
for
have. I
sure,
don't.
for sure. I mean, a lot of people turn to religion to find, I guess, a similar comfort and to have some sort of faith in where their afterlife is. That way, they don't have to worry about it. I guess, but I guess in that in itself is worrying about it to some
Yeah.
degree. But yeah, this was fun. This was good discussion. It was a good easy week. I love ambient albums because that means I don't have to read lyrics. So
Hell yeah.
I'm all about it.
Well, tell me that next week's album won't have lyrics, Jeremy. Huh?
I
Huh?
don't
Huh?
know
Oh.
because we're going in another new uncharted territory, not completely uncharted territory, I suppose. But next week we're going to be listening to the album Cross Pollination by the artist Lane 8. The album came out last year. It's another pretty short. It's seven tracks, 33 minutes. So it's going to be another relatively quick listen. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, Lane 8 came up when I was listening to Rufus Du Sol's new album. So I believe it's in a similar kind of housey, electronic, maybe a little bit of trance kind of vibes. So that's what we're getting into next week.
I'm all about that.
It felt right, and it was an easy pick for me because I didn't put a whole lot of thought into it this week, and I forgot to pick an album until we were already starting this episode. So I was like, okay, we're gonna do Lane 8 Cross Pollination. So that's what we're doing. Let us know if you listened to this album this week with us by Library Tapes. Let us know what your experience was with it, and if you had some sort of vivid narrative to it, or if you had similar experiences or different experiences. Let us know in comments. Send us tweets. Do the social media stuff that we loathe doing here at Feedback Loop Podcast. I promise we'll respond. It's much easier to engage with people when we know that they're listening and they're responding to us. So do that stuff and stay in our feedback loop.